Howdy, YouTube parts. Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today we're going to do a new project, something I've never done before, custom. And you can do this for several different things, but I'm doing a custom hand wrap on this fishing pole. So it'll have a custom leather wrap with the person's name engraved on it, and we'll use the engraver today on the piece of leather. I'll show you how I'm going to do that. Then I'll show you how I'm going to wrap that onto this handle. So come on in and let's get started. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, I did a practice run on a piece of scrap to make sure I had the location correct of the name and everything. So I used painter's tape on my tile that I have my engraver set on so that I know exactly where I can place that so that I get my name engraved exactly where I want it. So I want it to where it's right on top of that handle. So I'm going to put my laser safety glasses on here, and I'm going to send this file to the machine. And then it'll go ahead and engrave the name. Now what I did was I just put it in a paint file, did kind of a script type font, and then I saved it as a JPEG so I could use it in my laser engraving software. So basically it just thinks it's engraving an image. And I did, again, I did a practice run on this just to make sure the size was right, the location was correct of the name, and it turned out good. So I went ahead and cut me a good piece, the exact same size. So it should be a pretty nice customized fishing pole. If you wanted to, you could put some images on it or whatever. I just decided that I wanted to just engrave his name on it. So we'll wait for that to finish up, and then I'll show you the completed engraving. Alright, so there's the completed engraving. Take my laser safety glasses off here. see how I was able to put it in the center, and that was by doing the practice on the scrap. Now I'm going to take you over and set you up on the workbench. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is take my engraved piece of leather, and this, where it's really black, some of that's burnt. You gotta remember, leather is nothing more than skin, so that's actually burned leather. So we're gonna have to get that off of there. That's what it looks like once it's been cleaned up. So what I'll do is I'll take a microfiber cloth, make sure I've got a real nice dry clean side of that cloth, and what I'm going to do is just clean that dried burnt part off, and it comes off on the rag, and that's what I like about a microfiber. It doesn't just smear it, it picks it up. So there it is now with it cleaned up. Now what I'm going to do, and I tested this on my test piece too, is I'm going to take, this is pre-dyed leather, so I'm not going to have to dye it. But what I am going to do, since it'll be in the elements, is I'm going to use this leather sheen and protectant. Protects and conditions leather with a durable acrylic finish is what it is. It's fibings. I've used it on several things before and it works great. So I'll put a little bit on a clean white cloth, and I'm going to put that all over the surface of that leather. Now I'm going to, let me get this off of this, put it on there. So I'm working it to make sure that I get it all over the surface and down in to the engraving, because I want to protect that leather that got burnt out of there by the laser. So I'm just working that in, and you'll notice it'll get shiny as you're working that in. Now you stop, go back to a microfiber cloth again, get a nice clean part of your cloth, nice surface, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to buff that out. And at first it may look like it's going to dull it down, but if you keep buffing on it, it pops up and shines real nice. So we'll go ahead and lightly buff it. It dulls down for a second, and then it starts popping with a shine. And I am very, very lightly, I'm not putting any pressure hardly at all on this rag. Alright, so there you can see the shine that sheen put on there, and it put that acrylic protectant on there also. So we got down into the engraved portion and everything. So now I know this is going to be protected. Now the next thing I want to do is go ahead and put my stitching holes in here. And I'm just going to put them about a 1/16, maybe a 1/16 to an 1/8, not quite an 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And I'm going to put another piece of leather under that too. make sure I get good penetration. It's not that thick a leather, but I want to make sure that I get a nice hole to do my stitching in. And then I'll just work my way down. I've got a 6-prong stitching punch that I'm using because I'm just going in a straight line here. No curves, no angles. And then I get down here to the end and I'll line those up. So I get my holes all the way to the end here. Then all I have to do is turn it around. Do the same thing on the other side. Now it's the same length. So, and that's another thing. It depends on, what you're doing this for is going to depend on the size of the leather. That's why I didn't really get into the size of the leather, because even if you did a couple of different fishing poles, the handles are going to be different sizes, so that makes your leather different sizes. So it's all custom to each individual pole that you may do. So all right, so there's the stitching holes. So it is ready to be placed on the handle. Now, one thing that I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead, take this protective plastic off of here, which it would come off anyway. Be very careful with that knife because this is a cork handle. Then I want to see, by placing this on here, I want to see if I stitch this on here just bare like that, how much is that going to hold? Is it going to want to slip? Because if not, if it seems like it's going to hold real well, because I do have a small gap back here, especially at the top, because this is not perfectly round, the same size all the way down, but it's going to pull that leather snug against that cork, and I wanted to see if that was going to move, and it doesn't feel like it's going to at all. So I'm not going to bother with putting any type of rubber cement or contact cement or anything like that on there to keep that on there. I don't think there's going to be a problem with it wanting to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this to where the name is actually on the top. So my stitching will go on the bottom. So it'll be somewhat hidden under here. I'm going to start at the top toward the reel, and then I'm going to work my way down to the bottom and finish at this end, at the tail. So I'm going to look here and see in my stitching supplies maybe what color I want to use. Here's a And I've got tan, I've got white, I've got black, artificial waxed sinew, and I've got some waxed thread also, but I believe I'm going to use this tan waxed sinew, and I'm going to pull it out and go just a little bit longer than my stitching length or the length of my handle, and then I'm going to cut it twice that long. Make sure that I have plenty to work with. Move that out of my way. And then the way I'm going to start this, let me go ahead and thread my needle. I'll pull that down 3 inches or so, snug that. And the way I'm going to start this is I'm basically going to tie a single knot on this corner where I'm going to start my stitching. And there's all different ways you could do that. You know, it's kind of like anything else. There's multiple ways of doing it, whether it's the right way or the wrong way. That's a matter of opinion, I suppose. So I'm going to pull this through the first hole, and I am going to tie that onto that first hole so that I know I have a really good anchor point. So once I tie that, I'll take the excess, cut that off. I'll take a lighter, melt that, and flatten that out so that knot can't come out of there. So now I know I've got a great solid starting point. Now this is going to be a problem because I want to stitch it with it facing up, and that's going to just keep fighting me the whole time. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that off, and most of these, when they come from the factory, they do come with some zip ties on there, and that's just for packing. First thing I do when I buy one is take those off, but we're going to need to get those out of the way anyway. So we'll pop those off. We'll take the reel out. We'll lay it to the side. And now I can lay this flat and work on it with this straight up. So that's going to make it much easier for me to work on, and it can kind of lay its natural spot. And I'll go ahead and find my first hole on the other side, pull the sinew through, and then that way I can find exactly where I want to start my stitching. and have my leather be my seam this way. So I'm just going to come back, go to the second hole, and I'm going to go in the second hole, under, into the second hole on the other side, and I'll show you a little closer up here in just a second. And I'll snug that down, and as I snug that down, it's going to pull that leather together there. So it's going to make a real nice, tight wrap. I'll keep doing that. So I'll go back over and then through and in through the bottom on the other side and out the top, and just keep snugging that up as I go. And you'll see, I'll show you again here in a second after I do a couple more of these, you'll see what it does is it starts pulling and snugging that leather, that seam together. And it makes for a nice stitch too. Alright, there's a few of the stitches in, and you can see how it's pulling that leather together right there. So I'll continue on the stitching, and as soon as I get down to where I'm going to terminate, I'll come back. Alright, so I'm down to the end, and if you've noticed, this is a little bit darker. What I did was I redid this with a little bit of thicker leather material. I tried to use as thin as I possibly could, and when I started pulling these stitches real tight on this back, this material, as thin as it is, didn't really have a lot of give, so I popped a couple of stitching holes on that. So what I did was I went back and I laser engraved a piece that was just a little bit thicker, not a lot, but it was a lot more pliable too, so it really held the stitches good. You can see how tight those stitches are and how it pulls that together. Now the reason it's further apart here is because this cork handle is bigger in diameter here than it is down here. So it still turned out great. It looks awesome. So I'm ready to terminate this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the last hole, and again, there's several ways to do this. I'm not, I'm just doing it the way that I prefer to do it myself, and I'm sure there's several ways to do it, whether it's, correct or incorrect. That's personal preference in my opinion, and I am not here to ever say that I'm doing anything the correct way or the way someone else may do it. So it's a personal preference thing. So I'm going to pull that through that last hole. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that last hole again, wrap around, and push through the exact same hole. And what that's going to do is that's going to, let me get you a better angle here, that's going to cover the end with a stitch instead of it just being at an angle. Now I'm going to have a stitch all the way across. So let's go ahead and pull that through, and it will be a little tougher because I've got two thicknesses of sinew through there now. So let's pull that snug, and now you can see how that finished across there. So now I've got to stitch straight across to finish that up. Now I want to lock that in. Here's where the personal preference thing comes in. I want to make sure that that can't come loose. So the only thing I'm going to do is go under my two thicknesses of sinew there from the bottom, and I am going to take that through, loop my needle through it, and then snug that down and lock that knot right there, right in that stitching hole. So you can't even really see it. So it kind of disappears into that last hole there. And what it did was it locked it down, and I can take my scissors and cut the excess sinew off. Now I'm going to take my stylus, my lighter, and I'm going to melt that and push that down to terminate that so that can't come out of there. So there's my finished handle grip, customized with the name laser engraved on there. And you can play around with it. I've done several different tests on different kinds of leather, different thicknesses, different colors, different types, and obviously you get a different result most of the time by using those different ones. But I just think it just turned out really good. The name is just awesome. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put this back on. I'm just going to snug that up. I don't want to crank it down too tight. But then there is the finished product with the reel. And I'll give you a better shot of that when I get a little wider view, and I'll put the rest of the rod together. Alright, so got a completed, customized handle grip for this open face reel and rod set up. Got my customized name engraved, stitching down the back side, and again you could have used any different colors of sinew or thread that you'd want. I kind of did that so that I had a little bit of contrast. It turned out great. It is super snug on there. It is not going anywhere on that cork. It's definitely going to stay, not twist or anything, or not slide. So the way this is made, this end at the very tip is a little tiny bit larger than right here. So that's definitely going to keep it from going this direction. And this end is larger than the center, so it's going to keep it from sliding that way. I don't think it's going to slide anyway because it's so snug on there, and I did not use any contact cement or glue on that. I could have, but I didn't think I needed it, especially going onto this cork. Now, if it was going onto a plastic handle, yeah, maybe I would have done that. But with this cork, I don't think that's going to be a problem. So, another project in the books. Turned out great. This is something you could do uh, as, to make a little money, or, you could do it as a gift or a present. That's what this is. This is for a Christmas present. So I appreciate you coming along. Appreciate you watching. Please, if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button. It's free. I would greatly appreciate it. And as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.